And as more people are joining us, I would like to welcome everyone to the opening event of the project Your Language Counts. We are very happy to see attendees being increased by minutes. This is a webinar, so you will be muted, but please feel free to navigate the chat tab and ask any questions you might have there. Throughout the webinar, we have a Q&A slot with our keynote speaker, an interactive poll, and a panel discussion with questions raised directly from you. This webinar marks the debut of the EU project, Your Language Counts, which brings together a consortium of partners from 5 European countries: Finland, Germany, Greece, the Netherlands, and Sweden. And you'll learn more about the project and the partners during the presentation by the Goethe-Institut following the keynote speech. I am Kyrou, a language educator and with experience in Greece and the Netherlands, and a social linguist holding an MA from the University of Amsterdam. I'm currently collaborating with Talna Koza in the Netherlands, focusing on this project, and I'll be moderating today's event, facilitating the dialogue between the panelists and the attendees. Now I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Gisi Cannizzaro, our keynote speaker for today. Dr. Gisi Cannizzaro is the Managing Director of the Heritage Language Education Network and helped set up the Forum of Heritage Language Coalition in Europe. Gisi holds a bachelor's degree in German Studies, an Erasmus Mundus European Master's degree in Theoretical Clinical Linguistics, and a PhD degree in Child Language Acquisition. And we are very happy to welcome you, Gisi, as our keynote speaker today, as you bring expertise and experience in multilingual education, language acquisition, and of course, heritage language education. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I will take 1 second to share my screen. Yes, this is good. Yes, I'm here today on behalf of the charitable foundation that I helped create called Heritage Language Education Network, HLE Network. We're located in Eindhoven in the Netherlands, and we bring together people who are involved in heritage language education. The active in our network are largely community-based heritage language programs, but we do have some embassy programs and some freelance teachers listed in our directory as well. In a little while, I will tell you about our activities, but first, I would like to tell you more about my background. My name is Gisi Cannizzaro. I'm originally from the US, and I've lived in Europe for 19 years. I am very proud to come from a vibrant city called New Orleans. My last name, Cannizzaro, reflects my Sicilian heritage from a few generations back. Here you see a truck with my family's name on it, delivering Italian import products to grocery stores around the city. Now, because in post-World War II America, many immigrants believed that they should assimilate and speak as much English as possible, my great-grandfather did not speak enough Italian with my grandfather for him to become fluent, and in turn, my father was not spoken to in Italian when he was growing up. So I was raised monolingually. My family's story is an example of language loss that occurs when heritage languages are not valued. So now trying to prevent unnecessary language loss like this is something I'm fully devoted to. But it was not actually this very early part of my personal story that led to my determination. It came later, after finishing a PhD project in child language acquisition in Groningen more than a decade ago. I found myself in the fascinating function of educational consultant for a company that supports internationally mobile families. In order to be able to prepare good and accurate advice, I had to understand local and international curricula available across the world. And in addition to that, I also tried to find viable options for children to maintain their mother tongue. I built up knowledge about all the ways that students can maintain the home language. So at the first thing on the list, I have to move the heads of the people one moment. The first thing on the list, home country curriculum abroad. So this is basically possible for a child to sometimes you can follow the curriculum from your country of origin if there is such an international school abroad. So think of a French child following French curriculum at a French international school in Asia. Or what's shown in this first picture is me next to the sign of a Dutch international school in Singapore that offers Dutch curriculum. The second option here, international school with heritage language education. Students can often have access to decent mother tongue lessons at English language international schools across the world. A good example I can name would be the International School of The Hague, which is quite well known for arranging an impressive range of heritage language lessons for its students. Also, one of my favorites are the European schools found across Europe, those that offer the European Baccalaureate. Those are also well known for prioritizing heritage language lessons. The third listed here, now sometimes students were moving to a country that happened to have quite good arrangements made by the local mainstream education system as far as options for heritage language education. There are a handful of countries like this. So Sweden in particular is a fantastic example. In Sweden, mother tongue as a subject is included in the national curriculum, and mother tongue teachers are hired directly by the public school system. Other examples of what we might call heritage language friendly host locations would be parts of Canada, Australia, and Switzerland. And in those cases, public funds are used to support community-based heritage language programs in various ways. And the last on the list, for many, the only option is trying to find an educational program completely independent from the day school. So we would spend time helping families explore the availability of distance education in the home language. But with distance education, then the students would be required to do self-study. So we would also try to outline options for face-to-face learning. But that is if there was something available where the family would be living and if we could find it. And it turned out that these are two very big ifs. So for me, this was the real starting point, the many hours over many years that I spent searching for these options for families. It was the first step in discovering what we at HLE Network now call a mismatch. Mother tongue lessons are so important. They are so valuable. We recommended them for almost every family we spoke to. But the community-based programs, they were really well hidden and they were quite fragile. So first, let's touch on why heritage language education is valuable, and then let's look at why heritage language educators are in need of support. Why did we advise heritage language lessons for almost every family? A big reason that we did so in the context of the consultancy work that I just described was because if a family was on a temporary contract abroad, if the father or the mother who was working was on a temporary contract, the employer assumed that the family would return to the country of origin and that the children would stream back into the education system of the home country. So in this context, heritage language lessons were advised to make the repatriation as smooth as possible for the children. But even when there were no plans for the family to return to the home country, we still advised heritage language lessons. And this was simply because of the benefits they are expected to have for children in general. At the individual level, children can really suffer if they experience unnecessary language loss. They're not able to speak with extended family. They can feel a huge missed opportunity, especially when they get older, to realize that there was a missed opportunity. And the types of benefits that a multilingual person can have if they develop the heritage language range from cognitive to academic to socio-emotional and economic. And on a broader scale, the promotion of heritage language education has benefits for societies in general. Multilingual education leads to a population that has a quite important skill set, intercultural communication skills, empathy, and understanding for other cultures, which is really crucial in these globalized times. And as most of you will know, having access to lessons in the mother language is a human right according to UNESCO. So ideally, that right is exercised whenever possible. Why are heritage language educators in need of support? As we just saw, heritage language education can be arranged via the mainstream school system or via community-based programs or via some collaboration of these entities. If we look at community-based programs, there are several different ingredients you need to run a successful program. And it is too easy to be missing some pretty key ingredients. You need to have enough committed families, students, teachers, and volunteers. You need to have adequate funds. You need to be able to find a suitable and affordable lesson location. You often need to develop lesson materials suited to a very mixed group of students, and you have to have the skills and time to run a tiny organization alongside your other responsibilities like your career and your family. Let's look at some quotes here from the literature that sum this all up very well. There is a dissonance between the theoretical desirability of language maintenance and the practical impossibility of successfully attaining it. So look, already in the 1960s, people saw the mismatch that I saw just some years ago. Another one, teaching heritage language happens against all odds. This is a quote from, oh, I didn't check with the Germans here how to pronounce the last name, Feuerfächer. And I have to say that this article from 1997 is one of my favorites because it offers a really important perspective from the heritage language teachers and with examples of how they were treated negatively by the other subject teachers in the Canadian public school system. And these teachers who were being treated negatively were technically teaching within the mainstream school system, but they were still marginalized. And the testimonies from the teachers are really moving and will probably resonate with you if you have a look. And see what else she says. Survival becomes a triumph. Goodness, is it so dismal? Well, yes, that is the point. It can be. So what can we do about it? When there are countless ways for something to fail, the good news is that there are also countless ways that we can support it. In 2022, with our help, experts came together from across the world who work in this field, many from universities or nonprofit institutions, to form a heritage language global think tank. We meet to discuss the challenges that we just looked at, but as a global issue. Of course, how heritage language is organized is going to differ in different parts of the world. The way it's set up will vary and every context is different, but the general issues faced are much the same. It turns out that it doesn't matter if you're in Ontario or New South Wales, you will find mainstream teachers who complain on Monday morning about finding items in their classrooms in a different spot, with blame and shame put on the well-meaning people who use the buildings during the weekend. And as we saw with Feuerfächer, complaints will be made even if the people teaching during the weekend are technically also mainstream teachers hired with public funds. Just last month for International Mother Language Day, the think tank launched a global call to action for heritage language education. In the global call, there is an easy-to-use list of recommendations for everyone from students to mainstream schools to policymakers. And the aim is to spark large-scale positive change. The document itself goes into more detail than I have today about the many benefits and the many challenges. I really encourage you to read it, to publicly pledge commitment to it, and to spread widely. I've selected some examples of the recommendations to go through with you today. There is actually more stakeholders mentioned than these 5 here in the document itself. For heritage language learners, be aware of your language rights. If you attend a heritage language program, tell people so. Let your neighbors know that you're doing this. If it's possible at all for you to receive certification or credit for your skills in your home language, try to get them. And once you've completed your program, see if it's possible for you to go back to volunteer or to teach yourself to keep these programs sustainable. For mainstream schools, a fundamental issue is space, places for these lessons to take place. Please consider opening your building to people who want to provide heritage language education. And if you're arranging professional development for your own mainstream teachers, consider allowing, if it's relevant content, consider allowing heritage language teachers from the community to audit the course. Journalists, I think we could do a lot of improvement here. If there is positive coverage about the achievements and contributions of heritage language programs, this will really help to raise the status of this form of education. And local businesses, include in your social responsibility policy ways to support heritage language education in the community where you operate. Here in Eindhoven, where we're located, there are several large multinational corporations who are hiring knowledge immigrants by the droves. And so they are really contributing themselves to a rapidly increased, the demographics of the students in local schools they're changing really quickly. So if they are contributing to this issue, then they should also contribute to the solution and support for the multilingual children growing up here. That's our view. And local and national governments, exactly what your EU project is doing. Create pathways toward an inclusive approach to heritage language education as part of mainstream education. And this last one simply says, try to make online resources available for heritage language learners, but not only the ones residing in your geographic location, but also, yes, individuals from your country who are living abroad. So this is just a few of the recommendations. We're very optimistic that this is going to have impact. We're not expecting it overnight, but over the coming years, we're going to really draw from this document and ask policymakers to pledge commitment to it. Of course, HLE Network has pledged support. I've outlined here a few of the types of activities we organize in order to create a sense of community among the people involved in this educational sector. We issue a monthly newsletter. We bring heritage language teachers and program managers across languages together at regular networking events. We were delighted to have Karain and Marta from Taal Narcose attend our 5th anniversary HLE networking night last September, and they can attest to how fun and inspiring it was. We try to improve the quality of heritage language education being provided. We worked with international partners to create international guidelines for professional practices in community-based heritage language schools. We also work together with international partners to organize annually every November an online free conference. The name of that collaboration is Folk Europe, which stands for Forum of Heritage Language Coalitions in Europe. We've organized 3 so far. They've been very successful. The topics were very relevant and attractive and useful. You can see videos on our website from past conferences, and our next one coming up, you can mark your calendars already, November 15th and 16th. Collaboration. We have brought different language groups in our region together to form the International Children's Book Collection at Eindhoven Library. And just this past January, we had the National Picture Book of the Year read aloud in 17 different languages. And visibility, of course, this is the big reason that motivated me at the start. We do not want the programs to be so difficult to find. People searching for them should be able to easily find them. So we maintain a public directory of programs operating in Eindhoven, and we aim to expand it nationwide. And I want to make an important note about visibility now. The aim of the increased visibility is to raise the status of this form of education, to get more students enrolled, and to improve the conditions surrounding this form of education. But the increased visibility can backfire in the sense that we get now requests that put even more of a burden on the programs. For instance, requests for volunteers from the language groups to translate things for free. We have to regularly remind people in a friendly way that these are usually completely volunteer-run operations. Many groups are already at their limit, and what they actually need is support and not additional burdens put on them with nothing in return. So if you are going to approach heritage language programs to seek collaboration, it is really important to keep this in mind. Outreach is also very important. So we can come up with a lot of activities aimed to support heritage language educators, but they will have the greatest impact if the public is not too riddled, if they're not too riddled by too many misconceptions about multilingualism and about mother tongue education. So to combat the misconceptions that we've encountered, we have developed an infographic that debunks 9 of the most common myths, and we also give presentations and workshops about these myths as well. Today, I talked a lot about community-based heritage language programs, which can be characterized as informal education. Your EU project will increase the availability of heritage language lessons within secondary school mainstream education or formal education. We believe that support for any form of heritage language education will benefit all forms. This is because there will always be a need for advocacy and support for heritage language educators of all kinds. There needs to be continuous pressure on policymakers to maintain and expand all existing forms of heritage language education. There needs to be continuous pressure on them to support heritage language educators regardless of whether they teach in informal or formal settings. And there needs to be continuous pressure on them to support public outreach campaigns that grow appreciation for this really precious form of education. So we wish you a lot of luck as you embark on your EU project. I just wanted to mention one final link between the community-based and mainstream forms. Keep in mind that a healthy ecosystem of community-based programs will mean also, hopefully, a healthy pool of experienced teachers who can potentially teach the lessons that you intend to set up at mainstream secondary schools. And I figured this could be an appropriate idea to open the Q&A with. And I want to take the chance to thank you once more for the invitation, and thank you also for your attention.
Thank you, Gisi. Excuse me for mispronouncing your last name earlier. Thank you very much for your insights. At this point, we can invite everyone to ask their questions to our keynote speaker. You can use the Q&A tab on your screens, and we can devote 5 to 7 minutes for that. As we are waiting for questions to reach us, maybe I can ask you, based on our piloting of this implementation project of heritage language classes into secondary schools, could you maybe have some thoughts about the advantages that heritage language teaching can offer to students in mainstream secondary education?
Yeah, I think getting credit for it. What you see is that between the ages of 0 or 4 to about 11 or 12, it's really fantastic to have these community-based programs where the children are young, they're forming their identity. They want to make friends in the other language. They kind of want to see what is the point of learning it. That lots of picnics and lots of Christmas celebrations and parties with those groups. Once students switch to secondary, they just don't have time anymore. They've kind of they're farther along in forming their identities, and they just have a lot of schoolwork. So there's so much dropout. Age 11 and 12, they don't attend the community programs anymore, even if those programs, which is more rare, but even if they offer something for the teenagers. So what Karain, I've always told her, what she's doing is fantastic, is because you fit it into what they need at that point in their lives, which is official credit and certification for their skills. And it has to be included the in the school package, because if you try to tack on something extra, there's just I think maybe 1 in 20 students would be able to handle that kind of extra work on what the typical high school package requires.
Mm-hmm. And as some questions have already started reaching us, one question from Stichting Talnakazo is how many different languages are within the Heritage Language Education Network?
How many different languages? Well, it's pre-pandemic, we had about 24, and it's less than that now because some programs have closed and never reopened. And the reason why 24 was so high was because we had one Indian language program that offered 7 or 8 languages all at once within their program. So once that one closed and didn't reopen, it's more around 15 now.
Mm-hmm. Camilla Holman from Uppsala is asking, you mentioned the 9 myths about heritage language. Can you name a few?
Yes, these are just hobby clubs. There's no real learning taking place. It's just grandparents cooking cookies for the children. Um, that it's just for the expats. It's just for the internationals. It's just for the kids who moved here. We find that 75% of the students enrolled in the programs in our region were born here, and the families have no intention of leaving. So the children themselves attending these programs don't feel like internationals or expats. And can I do one more? I've got time for one more.
Yeah.
Um, that the community-based programs don't need the help of the local community where they operate. They can get all the funding they need from the parents, and they can get all the funding and support that they need from the country of origin. It's just not true. They really suffer if there's not appreciation and recognition and acknowledgement from the area where they operate. That's just 3 of the 9. But I can send you the link to share with your attendees that brings you directly to the infographic later.
Please, that would be great. Larissa Xinovitz, again from our partners, is asking how could we add more pressure on the authorities globally, or at least here in Europe, in order to spread out heritage language teaching, at least theoretically, she's adding.
How to put pressure on the policymakers? I don't know. We've got how many? We've got 94 heads together here. So um, time to come up with some brainstorms. When I listen to a gentleman from Sydney in New South Wales, he's been lobbying for decades, and he says what works is treating this as an educational sector, seeing it as treating it and talking about it as if it's a legitimate educational sector and not just grandparents cooking special cookies for their kids, and talking about you have to talk about it in terms of economics and what is it, what what is in it for the country. So you need to frame it as you're making yourselves more competitive in the globalized market if you have multilingual citizens who's able to do trading and business with other countries. So that's what he says works, because there's, I don't know, 25 different amazing reasons why you should support it. When you're lobbying, you have to choose the ones that are really relevant for whoever you're talking to.
Perhaps time for one last question from Laura Hitti from Familia in Finland. Laura says that it would be great to hear your thoughts on content of teaching. As you mentioned, at the age of 12 or so, children are forming their identities and have their own interests. How should grammar and linguistic skills be balanced with children's interest or sense of belonging to keep them motivated?
If it's incorporated into the mainstream schooling, you might have more than only 3 hours a week. Some community-based programs still with the teenagers, the ones that do offer programs to teenagers, they're still just dealing with what can we achieve within 3 hours a week. And what's very popular right now is project-based learning. And a very good example of project-based learning is coming out of England right now. It's called Critical Connections Project-Based Storytelling. And I can also send you the link about that. That framework is specifically made for people who are teaching young adults how to develop their heritage language, and it's the students can choose the topic of the project themselves, and then they create a video out of it. And it's been used not only in England, but in all parts of the world specifically for this purpose. So I'm happy to share that link later as well.
That would be also great. We can wait for these links on the chat. Gisi would like to thank you once more for your insightful presentation on behalf of all the partners and the project. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
So it's time to move on to a more comprehensive presentation of the project itself. I'd like to welcome Sabine Brachmann-Bosse, Head of the Language Department in Goethe-Institut in Sweden and Director of the project, Your Language Counts, as well as Sabine Schmidt and, Elisabeth, and the project's coordinator.
Yes, thank you, Mara. Together with Elisabeth, we are going to briefly present the project, Your Language Counts, that has just started. And I would like to start with some facts. Why have we initiated this EU project on heritage languages across Europe? In the European Union, approximately 10% of pupils speak at home a language other than the national language. That doesn't seem to be much, but it differs a lot from country to country. For example, in the Swedish school system, 42% of all pupils were eligible for mother tongue tuition, and in the Netherlands there are some 30%. So the same applies for many other countries, especially in Northern and Western Europe. In many countries, usually newcomers are expected to quickly integrate into the new school system and to learn the new language. And their mother tongue usually plays only a minor or no role at all in the new school. The linguistic diversity in today's classrooms is a significant challenge, but it also offers a great potential because studies show that promoting the mother tongue in schools has a positive impact on integration, and pupils usually tend to do better also in other subjects. So altogether, these were reasons why we said at the Goethe-Institut, also with the example of Sweden, we need an exchange of experiences and practices on the topic on a European level. You can move on to the next slide. Yeah, this is just a quick side note that there are many terms, all more or less targeting the languages that we are referring to. We are using the term heritage language teaching that is also widely used in academia. In German, it's heritage language, it's Herkunftssprachenunterricht, so the same term. But there are also home language teaching, mother tongue instruction, mother tongue tuition, and first language teaching. Yeah, so they are more or less, they have the same meaning, but with slight differences. But we use the term heritage language teaching in the project. We have three objectives that we would like to achieve with our project, Your Language Counts. The first is promoting integration and participation of multilingual migrants and refugee pupils, as well as second and third generation pupils in the national education systems in Europe. Second is promoting the provision of heritage language teaching in schools. And the overall objective is that we would like to increase awareness and stimulate a policy discourse on the importance and visibility of heritage languages. We have 8 partners in our partner network that are carrying out the project. They are named here. They come out of 5 countries: Sweden, Finland, Netherlands, Germany, and Greece. And all partners have a lot of experience and expertise in the field of working with heritage language teachers, with school boards, municipalities, family outreach, and in general in lobbying for heritage language education. But beside our 5 partner countries, we intend to involve also partners from 12 further EU member states that are tagged here. And in these states, we would like to raise awareness on the topic of heritage language teaching. And now I hand over to Elisabeth, who is going to briefly introduce the pilot project that is kind of the core of our project.
Yes.
Elisabeth, please.
Thank you very much, Sabine. Okay. Yes, here you can see our pilot plan for the upcoming school year of 2024 and 2025. We're currently talking to 18 teachers from 6 schools in 3 countries, so Sweden, Finland, and the Netherlands, who teach our pilot languages, which are Arabic, Farsi, Russian, Somali, Turkish, and Ukrainian. And the idea is to cover those 4 parts, namely school organization, teacher training, teaching materials, and family outreach. We want the teachers to exchange their experience, not only within their own country and community, but really across borders, so to really come together. And they will develop teaching practices and will be provided with professional support by us, which means they get technical input during workshops. They go through a phase of trial and error with implementing everything they learned from those workshops. This could be different methods, it could be materials, a way to reach out to parents maybe, to inform them about the subject, etc. And then they evaluate like which method, material worked or did not work and why so. And at the end, everything that did maybe not work will be adjusted and goes back into the trial and error loop. So this goes on until we have a refined solution that can be successfully applied in different contexts. And of course, all of us 8 partners that were just mentioned are gonna support the teachers while doing that. Yes. And on this slide, I'll present you our planned outcomes for this project. These are like all really tangible and measurable outcomes. And the first one being a set of curated teaching materials that will be the outcome of our pilot phase with the teachers. During this project, we will also create a platform for heritage language teachers to enable all heritage language teachers in Europe, so not only the ones within our program, to exchange ideas, share materials, and so on. And we will evaluate the impact of heritage language teaching on children and their families, teachers, and the school community throughout the pilot. And after the pilot, we want to provide heritage language teaching implementation handbook with all the best practices we curated during the pilot. And it is supposed to support educators and school boards and municipalities to provide HLT and giving them argumentations for HLT provision. And it will be easily accessible online in all project languages. A political correlate to the handbook will be the roadmap. It addresses the political framework conditions for HLT provision to give a step-by-step guideline. So this way we really tackle the field from all sides and provide support and structure that can be adjusted for other countries to use and really benefit from. So this is our vision. And yes, if you want to stay informed about the project that we just talked about, you're very welcome to just, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn. We have our own website that I will copy paste later on in the chat. And of course, you can always just send me an email. I already sent you one with the invite to this Zoom event. So feel very free to reach out if you want to talk about this subject with us. We'll be very excited. And now I will give it all back to Mara.
Thank you, Sabine and Elisabeth, for a more comprehensive view of the project. Now we would like you, our attendees, to participate and react to a couple of questions we have for you, so you can help us collect some more insights and feedback on what we do, so we can do it better and we can do it together. So we have created a Mentimeter poll. Please feel free to go either on a different tab or use your devices to link. You can enter the code on your screens, and we'll give you a few seconds for that, and we will present you with the questions we have prepared. It is easier if you go on a phone device. We can maybe provide the code, entering code on the chat. I can type it there now in case it disappears from your screen. So you go to menti.com, you enter this code you see on the chat, and maybe we can move to the questions. So we also have some time to think about them. Great, so we can see already some entries. The first question is how much experience you have with heritage language education. Our audience today is quite diverse. It varies from parents, teachers, educators, and of course, researchers and scholars on heritage language education and language education in general. So this is a nice overview of how much experience people who are interested in the project have with the topic. We see that most people have some or much experience. So that is great. We expect more insightful feedback in this case. We see some people have also no experience, which is also nice to see, because we assume that after this webinar, you will be in contact with some of the project's topics. People who have already answered the first question can move to the second one. In total, the questions are 3. We will try to present as many results as possible at this part, but in case we don't have the time to present all the answers in the open-ended question, we'll make sure that we'll take them into careful consideration and include them on our website after the conclusion of the event. Yeah, maybe we can move to the next slide. So the next question would be a heritage language teaching platform, which is one of the products of this project, will be available to all European schools. So would that be beneficial according to your opinion? And we can see that most of the entries strongly agree that it will be a beneficial tool. That's great. We already see entries on the third question too. So what do you expect from the project Your Language Counts? Inspiration, cooperation, awareness and visibility. To see very happy students and parents. I hope it will gather support to our teachers. Many of the heritage language teachers in Sweden have little or no formal education. To work as a stepstone for future global challenges. Important progress. Vernetung. I deliver it as I see it. Different perspectives, ideas, and inspirations. New perspectives on heritage language education, empowerment strategies. A question about the timeline of the project, which can be answered as soon as we see more results at this part. An impact on Europe and for the diversity of languages. I will stick to the English language so it will be easier for everyone to understand. Cooperation with other teachers that teach the same language would be great. A roadmap to authorities to follow on how to implement education. To set a new standard for how heritage languages should be taught. More insight on how other countries and other teachers work with the subject, and a best practice handbook, which is also our goal. Working to achieve more awareness for the necessity of heritage language education. Again, cooperation, contacts, guidebooks, exchange of experience, expertise. Advocacy for heritage language teaching. Networking. A platform is a wonderful idea and very needed. Hopefully it will influence the national responsible institutions in supporting the heritage language education. And well-being of the students. Inclusion of a general perspective on multilingual competencies. Awareness and support for the teachers with materials and teaching techniques specific for the target group. Awareness and hopefully some influence on decision makers to nudge towards a more positive attitude, and to make European research on heritage language teaching and projects, NGOs, visible to inform about such activities. Improve the status of heritage language teaching and valorize it. Share material and facilitate politics, open minds. I think all of our entries are really inspiring and motivate us to stick to our objectives, which are very much close to what you have also shared with us. We will keep your answers, of course, and so we will go through them in more detail. Please feel free to keep sharing your input. Maybe we can answer about the timeline of the project, Sabine or Elisabeth.
Yes, the project is going to run until spring 26. Yeah, so now that it has started, it's a bit more than 2 years. And so we started to meet in January for the first time in our partner network. And now this is the first event in which we present the project and the activities to the public, yeah, to you and to experts. And then, as we introduced in our presentation, the core of the project is the school year 24-25. So from September till May, we will work together very intensively with the selected teachers, but we also would like to involve all other teachers from all European countries that we are targeting through our platform. So we will reach out through our social media channels and announce what is going to happen and how you could be involved. And we will also have further panel discussions. And at the very end, in February 26th, there will be a public conference that is supposed to be in Essen in Germany for a day or for 1.5 days, where we also would like to invite everyone who is here today, and we will announce this in time so that you can save the date.
Great, thank you, Sabine. Yeah, of course, we will find this information on the website and the social media, so anyone interested can follow us there. So I would like to thank you all for your participation in this part, and we can transition to the final part of our event today, which is the panel discussion. And I'd like to welcome our panel members. allow me to give a brief introduction for everyone. I'd like to start with Mr. Walubengo Muliro Singoro, who is a software engineer at Vincit in Finland. Apart from his professional role, Walu is a father of 2 multilingual children and speaks Swahili, English, Finnish, and Luya himself, regional language of Kenya. His first-hand experience as a parent navigating language education provides valuable insights into the topic. So I would like to welcome Walu to our panel, as he will share his perspectives and experiences on heritage language education in Finland. Next, Dr. Jule Böhmer is an educator in Hamburg, and she's interested in the future of learning and teaching methods. She works in various functions in educational institutions, and she's involved in the discourse on contemporary education. She is a lecturer in the didactics of heritage language for Russian and Turkish at the University of Hamburg. She also trains future teachers of Russian and coordinates the teacher training for heritage language teachers in Hamburg. So we are delighted to welcome Jule to our panel, as she will share her insights from Hamburg, Germany. Dr. Reath Warren is our next panel member. Dr. Reath Warren is a senior lecturer at the Department of Education at Uppsala University. Her academic focus revolves around multilingualism and newcomers learning. She has conducted linguistic ethnographic studies exploring the development of multilingual literacies through mother tongue instruction and tutoring in Sweden and community language schools in Australia. She is currently co-editing an anthology on how teacher education prepares pre-service teachers for working with multilingual students, which will be published later this year. And she collaborates with mother tongue teachers, tutors, and municipalities to enhance learning conditions for multilingual and newcomer students. Welcome, Anne. We are happy to have you here today, as you will share your insights from Uppsala, Sweden. And finally, last but not least, Margret Ibrahim William, who is an experienced Arabic teacher currently working at Babel language courses and as a heritage language educator at Tal Narcoze in the Netherlands. Her previous experiences include working as an Arabic language instructor at University of Amsterdam Tallinn, where she taught standard Arabic to non-native speakers. And with 11 years of teaching Arabic to diverse nationalities and age groups, Margret has honed skills in creating engaging learning material and student development. And of course, she has an extensive educational background with bachelor's in Spanish and a diploma in teaching Arabic. And she's currently pursuing a bachelor's in teaching education in English at Utrecht University. We are delighted to have everyone here with us. And at this part, we'd like to invite our attendees to take this wonderful advantage of having this diverse panel and ask questions. And as we start, and when waiting for questions from our audience, maybe I can ask with some questions. I can start with Walu. Walu, would you like to share any challenges or successes that you have experienced as a parent in the educational system in Finland?
Thank you very much, Mara, for the wonderful introduction and for having me this panel. Yes, as you mentioned in the introduction, I'm a father of 2. I have a son who is 12 years old now and an 8-year-old daughter. My son was born here in Finland, but my daughter was born in Kenya. I'm originally Kenyan. Now, we do use Swahili at home, and they go to a bilingual school where they learn in Finnish and English. Initially, when my son started, when he was 7 years old, when he started school, we applied for him to learn Swahili as his mother tongue. We didn't get a teacher then because there was no teacher. Then we got a teacher in the 2nd year when he was in 2nd grade. But then the teacher, for some reason, for reasons known to the municipality, the program was cancelled. So it then stopped. So the challenge was then, how do we still continue teaching him Swahili? And we tried different options. One of them was actually try to get a teacher online to teach from Kenya, but that didn't work out quite well. Then later on, my daughter started school. Again, initially there was no Swahili teacher, but we kept on applying every year and calling the municipality and asking and so on. So later on, actually last year, towards the end of last year, we then got a Swahili teacher who started teaching Swahili to both of them. But because the students are diverse in the age, they were just grouped into 3 groups, I think older group and younger group. So for instance, we have 1st graders and 4th graders grouped together, which is a challenge in a way for the teacher. We also have different language levels for the students in those classes. We have, for instance, we use Swahili at home. My daughter, who was born in Kenya, actually speaks Swahili quite fluently. But then we have students in that class who don't speak Swahili at all. So they are learning Swahili from the beginning in the class. So in terms of challenges, I would say, yeah, it was tricky getting a place or a teacher to teach. It is tricky to, even after we've gotten, it's tricky for the teacher to arrange those classes in a setup that is ideal. The other challenge, which is not specifically for me or for us, but for other parents, is because the way it's done, it's for the whole municipality. So there are 2 municipalities in that are offering this in the capital area in Finland. There's Espoo and Vanta. So all the students from Espoo, they had come to the same school. For us, the school is near our home. Might be the role of applying and questioning might have helped. But then I know that the other parents who drive several distances away. So because of that, for instance, one of the group where my son goes, it's now all online because other students are not able to make it on time. So those are some of the challenges and then there's another challenge that because some of the parents didn't know on time, so they didn't apply. And we're trying to get more and more parents to bring in more students so that the program does not die off. The positive thing or good thing is at least from as somebody who appreciates languages, I will say that I pick up that students or children who are actually multilingual and those who study their mother tongue is true indeed that they're better at languages and they're better, their self-confidence is way higher especially when they talk about their country and of course when I go with them back home, when we travel back, they can communicate to those who don't speak English, for example. So that's a positive thing for me as a parent. And I think also the other benefit that I think one of the our keynote speakers spoke about it, that could be used to lobby and push this for government officials, on those officials who are in charge of such programs, is that countries now, especially in the West, are trying to attract expatriates. And it's a big deal if those who move here can, because some of them already move with kids, or even if they move permanently, they will want their kids to continue with their language, native languages from back home, or at least have a place where they feel at home. So this can be used as a way of attracting those expatriates to these countries. Thank you.
Thank you. I would also like to remind our audience that they are very welcome to ask their questions to all of our panelists. And our panelists themselves to also ask questions to each other if they feel like, since we don't have questions incoming at this point. We can maybe move to Margret. Margret, I'd like to ask you, how do you think a training program for teachers focusing directly on heritage language education could help you advance as a heritage language teacher yourself?
Yeah, it can benefit a lot actually, because this is a new thing. So we don't have much experience in this, and also we find it difficult to find materials or to find the things like books or anything that can be used in the program. So guidelines or training can help us a lot.
Thank you. Again, you are encouraged to take this wonderful opportunity of our panelists here and ask your own questions. In the meantime, I can move to you, Jule, and ask you, how do policy decisions impact the accessibility and quality of heritage language programs, in your case in Germany?
Yeah, hello. My name is Jule and I'm from Hamburg, Germany. And I think your question is a good, or Germany is a good example to answer your question, because we have in Germany the federal system, also in the educational system. And that means that we have 16 different educational systems within Germany. And I'm here from Hamburg and I can speak only for Hamburg, but we have heritage language teaching in public schools. But for example, in Bavaria or in Baden-Württemberg, in the southern part of Germany, there are no heritage language lessons at all. And so for the case of Hamburg, we already have for 20 years heritage language lessons as a regular teaching program in our public schools, in primary and secondary schools. And so I would say it's a successful example, but it showed that the recognition of the heritage language depends on the policy making. And for 20 years we are lucky that we have in Hamburg the situation that our educational municipality foster heritage language lessons. And so we are very lucky that we have a big offer of heritage language lessons. So we have more than 10 languages that we offer in public schools. And we have from first grade to Abitur. This is the German examination of public schools after the 12th grade. And so we have also the students have the possibility to do their final examination in Arabic, in Russian, in Polish, and so on. And this is a very meaningful recognition of the heritage languages.
Thank you, Jule, for your input. We can also move to Anne. And I would like to ask you, how does research inform policy and practice in heritage language education, particularly concerning diverse student populations, in your experience?
Thanks for the question, Mara, and hello, everybody. I'm thinking that the answer to this question completely depends on which country you live in. I have responded to this question, I suppose, in terms of Sweden, which is where I live. And in Sweden, since heritage language education, or mother tongue instruction, as it's called here, was introduced back in 1977, there's been quite good communication between politicians and academics. Some researchers have written about this and referred to this communication as like a cat flap in a door, and saying in Sweden that the cat flap is quite flexible, so that, you know, academics and politicians, they talk to each other, and politicians would consult academics and be curious about the research in particular areas that they want to make policy for. This is, I guess, one of the reasons why we ended up having mother tongue instruction in the curriculum in Sweden, along with pressure and voices from the grassroots communities in Sweden as well. So it was a little bit like a combination there of pressure or interest from researchers and also voices from the grassroots. So I suppose in Sweden, policy and practice, let's just say policy has been impacted to quite an extent, and I would say a positive extent, by researchers. This varies. It has varied in different periods of political rule, but interestingly enough, until 2022, when we got a new government in Sweden, there was unilateral support amongst all the political parties for tax-funded mother tongue instruction in schools. I think that's quite unique in terms of, well, the rest of the world, the rest of the countries in the world. So that's also, yeah, you can ask yourself, how did that happen? Where did it start? Is it because politicians are listening to researchers? Is it because heritage language education has had a good impact in Sweden? That's the way it's been. When it comes to research informing practice, I would say perhaps the connection is slightly more tenuous. We don't have official systematic education, research-based educational programs for mother tongue teachers in Sweden. There are some courses, there are even some programs, for example, for mother tongue teachers of Arabic, of Finnish, of Albanian, Serbian, Croatian, Bosnian. There's a few other examples. But they're not systematic, and there's no requirement for education. So yeah, research impacting on organization and practice in the classroom, I guess it would depend on where the mother tongue teacher, if we talk about classroom practice, is employed. If their employer, their municipal employer, offers good opportunities for professional development and competence development, then hopefully they would receive some kind of education which is based on research findings. So it's a little bit patchy. I guess that's the answer. But in terms of policy on, in terms of research on policy, at least in Sweden, researchers have been able to have their voices heard, and we continue to keep speaking up, especially in these times now where there is a strong voices within the Swedish Parliament that, well, would prefer to see mother tongue instruction abolished, at least the tax-funded variety of mother tongue instruction. And in fact, there's a government inquiry going on at the moment investigating mother tongue instruction, despite the fact that we had an inquiry only a few years ago, which is quite interesting reading.
Thank you, Anne. Multiple points to fuel the discussion. I will move to the incoming questions, though, so we can have some more interaction with the audience. We have a question about hybrid teaching forms, online teaching as well as classical classroom teaching. Do you have any opinion, any of you? The question is addressing everyone. How do panelists think about this hybrid teaching forms? Yes, well, please.
Well, I will say it, of course, depends on the age group, but for younger children, a hybrid or online teaching is not the best means. I've seen, because I didn't mention this earlier on, but my daughter's group, they also have every other week online lessons. And in families where there's more than one student in the same group, you will see it's hard for the teacher to control such groups. Because one will decide, I will now talk to my sister or my brother and not be listening to the teacher, or one will decide to tell the story about the birthday and so on. So it's tricky for that age group to have online lessons. That's one part of it. But the other part I feel is by the very nature that the interaction between the students and the teacher at that age group is quite important. So it's best that they actually have the face-to-face learning rather than the online or hybrid. Thank you.
Thank you, Walu. A question maybe mainly concerning Southern Germany, or more of a comment. There are heritage language classes there, but they're only offered by embassies or grassroots initiatives, not by the state, is the comment. And now a question from Sofia Grigoriadou. We have Greek heritage language education in North Rhine-Westphalia, a federal state in Germany, for over 50 years, offered by the German state. Nevertheless, children are unfortunately excluded from heritage language education if they hardly speak the language of origin. What do you think about this? Yes, Anne, please. Yes, and the floor is yours.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear you say my name. Yeah, I was actually going to, I can talk to that question, but I was also thinking about the question about distance education or hybrid forms. And I mean, I can really take the point that Walu made about it being difficult for the younger groups of children, but just pointing out that offering mother tongue instruction or heritage language instruction online potentially makes it more equitable. I did studies in Australia of heritage language instruction, and there's a researcher down there called Jannica Nordström, and she has written about online education in Swedish, actually, the community language of Swedish in Australia, and how parents there and the student who is online kind of work together to make the communication more smooth. And I know that in Swedish schools there is a kind of a rule that if a child is to have mother tongue instruction online, they are supposed to have like a supervisor with them, not a teacher. The teacher is online, but there's supposed to be someone with them there to make sure, I guess, the equipment is working, but also to supervise. And to be honest, I wouldn't really know how that works in practice, but maybe some people who are listening today who have done that kind of teaching in Sweden might be able to respond. The question there about children being excluded if they hardly speak the language of origin, yeah, that's very tricky, and it's an issue in all the countries that I have looked at and read about where there are groups of students learning their heritage language. There is always this thing about the mixture of groups, the mixture of levels within a group. And while some people come to the groups speaking, a certain level of the heritage language, who've grown up using it daily, reading books, etc., then you're just as likely to have students who come along who perhaps have just heard their parents talking, who may understand, have this passive reception, but be very unsure in terms of using it. I think there should be a more inclusive approach to heritage language education. There's also an argument for this kind of for grouping. Then, I mean, you can certainly look at that problem from many different perspectives. I think it's important that everyone who wants to learn a language should be able to learn a language. If it's their heritage language, if it's a foreign language, if it's a second language. Does a person who doesn't speak a language at all learn best in a classroom with fluent speakers? That's another question. There's probably better ways to organize it.
And with this opportunity, a question to Margret, who has taught both native and non-native students. Our attendees are asking, what is it like to teach Arabic as a heritage language, and how does it compare to teaching it to non-natives?
Yeah, so with native, they have much higher level. So they are like C1, C2 in speaking terms, but maybe with writing and reading, they are still behind because they don't get to practice reading and writing much as speaking, because they speak with the family, but they don't read and write in Arabic. And with non-native, yeah, they started from scratch. So they start with learning the letters and the sounds and everything from scratch. So, and yeah, they go with like speaking, reading, writing, all the skills are like at the same level. But when I teach native speakers, like there is a big gap between speaking and writing and reading.
Thank you, Margret. Jule, our next question is addressed to you. Laura is saying that it's really amazing that students can do their exams in their home language. I can imagine that there is some pushback to that. It would be great to hear a bit more about what the attitude to this might be and how they are addressed in your context.
I continue Margaret's thoughts because what is the aim of the heritage language lessons for the students, for the bilingual students? And the main aim is to get access to the world of literacy. So because in most languages they are not able to write and to read, and so we have different alphabets. So with Arabic or Dari or Russian, Ukrainian, and so on, and so they know their language as a family language and not as a language of communicate, or not a language of official communication, or language of literacy development. And so this is the aim for them. And so in the secondary school, the main aim is to develop the literacy skills. And so this is I think very similar to lessons in secondary and second foreign languages, so that they develop their skills in writing and reading. And so when we look at the exams, like the Abitur, the final exams in the German school system, they are not they don't they are not they are very similar to the English to the exams in English or in French or in Spanish, because we have listening, we have reading, we have writing, and so on. And the students have to practice a lot, many years to pass these exams. And so this is we had a study here in 2018, I think, and here the parents were asked why they want their students, their children, to attend the heritage language classes. And the main aim of the wish of the parents were that they learn to read and to write. And this is, I think, because this is not possible to learn at home with the parents. And so this is the big advantage of the heritage language lessons.
Great, thank you, Jule. Next question from Aliki Jatha from Alex. She thanks everyone for your input. The question is towards all panel members. How are objectives, what you expect from a child, your students to learn, inherited language learning, distinct from other language learning? Maybe a question towards Walu. Would you like to take this one as a parent?
Well, thank you.
I can repeat the question if you want.
Please do.
Yes, so how the objectives of heritage language learning differ to regular language learning or a foreign second language learning? Would you have different goals for your children as students of language learning when they learn a heritage language or a second language?
Well, for me, that's now more at a personal level. No, there's no a different objective of learning the heritage language as to any other language. My son, for example, I mentioned that they're both actually in bilingual class where lessons are taught both in Finnish and English equally as they go higher. But then they also, in the whole of Finland, students learn also, it's mandatory to learn Swedish at a certain point. And my son also learns German. Now, I have this, for me as a parent, is the same objective that, well, there's an advantage that that's my mother tongue. Swahili is one of my mother tongues. I have actually two. And it's spoken in several countries in Africa, in the East, or the whole of Eastern Africa, actually. But then, other than the fact that it's just, to me, it's just like any other language. I'm biased towards it because it's my mother tongue, but other than that, my objectives are the same. Thank you.
Thank you. A clear answer. A question from Camilla Humen from FFF Uppsala. What are your expert thoughts about heritage language education in the future? Something that will grow with increasing globalization, or the opposite? Yes, Anne, please.
I was going to say something about the previous question as well. And while I do agree that there are many objectives in common between learning any language and learning a heritage language, I think one thing that stands out, especially in the research on heritage language education, is this aspect of identity. I mean, it may well be that somebody, you know, a teenager sitting in the Netherlands learning English feels very connected to, I don't know, American culture or something, and it becomes to some extent some kind of part of their identity. But with heritage language learning, it is, I mean, you're basically sitting in a heritage language classroom because your parents have put you there often. Your parents speak that language, you hear it around you. And to prepare mother tongue teachers for working with those questions about interculturality, identity, hybridity, that for me is really, really important. And it often comes up at professional development workshops, you know, what can we do to help our students develop this kind of harmonious, multilingual identity. This is a question that's in steering, it's not a question, it's an aim that's in steering documents in Sweden. That's one of the aims of mother tongue, is to help students develop a multicultural identity. So in a sense that could be slightly different. And just to talk to Camilla's question, I don't think I can answer that question. question. I mean, the world, globalization is a fact. It's always been a fact. People move around the place, they change countries. Either they're forced to change country because of war or climate change, or because their parents get a job in another country, or they move around because they think it's fun and travel and end up somewhere else. Heritage languages education's existed for a long time, but it's always struggled in the face of dominant majority language ideologies, these myths that Gisi took up, that it's not important. But I think it will always exist, but I don't know if it will, you know, increase or not.
Thank you, Anne. A related comment to your first point, I think, is from Alexandra Virtanen, that parents do have different objective on heritage language or other languages because they want their children to learn more about culture and feelings, which themselves have. Some things you cannot learn in school classes, the feeling to belong to a special group. At this point, I think we can have our final remarks from our panelists, and who I will also invite to try and answer maybe questions on the Q&A by maybe writing a brief comment, as we have to wrap up for today. Would you like to make any concluding remarks? Walu and Margret, you had your hands raised earlier.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Anne, for bringing that up. I will say this a perspective that I also hold, is the only point I think I was looking at it as what is my main, like, why will I vote for this language? I'm for the language, and but I understand that, and I see that actually that the name itself, heritage language, it's one of the heritages that probably the only thing I can give to my kids, that I mean, taken from other generations. So that's the language I can give. And lack of that can mean, you know, identity is quite an important thing. For instance, I would also actually say that there are things when we travel back Kenya. I grew up in rural Kenya, and we go to the rural parts of Kenya. There are things I can't translate in any language. And it's quite important that they actually just stayed in Swahili or Luya, for example. So yes, that is one benefit of them learning the language. Of course, I already teach them the language at home. That's why we speak it at home, speak it to them. But teaching them in class, there are other aspects that they also learn in class that I can't teach. I will give you an example. Finnish language, for instance, we don't have excuse me. They use andeksi, but andeksi can also mean sorry. And so many other languages also don't have that. But Swahili by itself is a language that has a lot of polite sayings. You don't ask, for example, I just want to be given this. You say, literally translated, I pray that you give me this. So those are things that by the children learning that, and that I don't actually teach them that, by the way. We don't speak like that. Because generally Kenya also don't use that version of Swahili. But I've noticed because of class, they're now learning those things. And yeah, so those are part of heritage things that I will never, I mean, you know, I don't sit down and say, I'm now going to teach how to be polite, you know, and I'm sure that's probably not even what the teacher wants, but by teaching the language, that is being transferred to the children. So thank you for bringing that up, Anna. And yeah, it's definitely one of the objectives. Thank you.
Thank you too, Walu. And I think it is also a wonderful example of how local realities need to inform research, and research needs to support local realities. Again, I would like to thank everyone for participating in our panel discussion, either as a panelist or an attendee with their question. And I think at this point, we need to close. The opening event marks a milestone in the initiative of Your Language Counts project, and it was evident that fostering and preserving heritage languages are vital for promoting cultural diversity and inclusivity in education. And we are very happy you are all here today. As we move forward with the project, let us continue prioritize the importance of language diversity and provide equitable access to language education to all students. You can access this webinar in the future. It will be published, and more details about the project and the partners, as well as the progress of the project on our website, which we will share with you on the chat as a link. And again, thank you very much for being here today on behalf of all the partners. Stay tuned.